Jeff, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you
Very
for having me.
happy to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Let me start off by saying that we usually ease into those conversations with lighter topics. However, there's a very special topic on everyone's mind this week, and that is recent immigration policies. Mm-hmm. So we are 40% international, and it's affected us quite deeply. So as a CEO representing your company to the public, how did you think about reacting to last weekend's executive order?
Yeah, first of all, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
So there's different ways to go about addressing an issue like that. And you have to think about your audience, your constituencies, and who you're trying to reach, and what your objectives are. The first thing to keep in mind in a situation like that, at least for us at LinkedIn, is the well-being and the safety of our employees. We, like the student body here, have a number of immigrants at the company. We have a number of people who have yet to become citizens, who are here on working visas and green cards. And we wanted to make sure that we could identify anyone who was a citizen from one of the named 7 countries, and that they were here and present and accounted for and safe. And we wanted to also do that for their immediate family. So that was the very first consideration. Mm-hmm. The next thing we wanted to do was make sure that we were making clear how people could get involved if they wanted to help and make a difference. As a company, our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, all of them. That is irrespective of country of origin, ethnicity, religious belief. And we have had some ongoing programs to help refugees find work. That started in Sweden, and we had some success there, some early success. We extended that program to Canada, and with the executive order that was announced here last Friday, we accelerated the launch of what we call the Welcome Talent Program here in the United States. We also wanted to make sure that employees who wanted to get involved understood that through our employee-based foundation, they could contribute, and we could allocate those funds to efforts that are making a difference. Mm-hmm. Then there was the third kind of dimension of this, which is making clear, at least from my perspective, where I stood on this. And it's important. I don't feel the need to comment on everything, to be able to comment on anything. Mm-hmm. And from time to time, there are going to be issues that I feel are important for me to address, and they're important to our employees. And this was one of those times. Mm-hmm. And in a situation like this, at least through my experience, one of the things that I've learned is that you have to strike a very delicate balance when you're expressing personal belief versus expressing belief as a CEO, because you're representing your employees, your company. And in this particular instance, I felt the need to express my own views on this, and that was that this country, the United States, was founded on a first principle and belief that all people should have an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And America has truly been a land of opportunity. It is a country and an economy that was largely built on the tireless efforts of immigrants who came to this country seeking a better life for themselves and their families, that ultimately created a spirit of entrepreneurship and were able to innovate and introduce products and services and build companies that employed many, many people and made a difference in the lives of so many in this country and beyond. And I shared through social media a statistic that some people may be less familiar with, but that 40% of the Fortune 500 was founded by immigrants or the children of immigrants. Yep. Just as one empirical point to support this idea. And then again, coming back to our vision as a company where this becomes aligned, mm-hmm. is our position, our purpose to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And so I was expressing that position. And at the same time, and you asked the question, how as a CEO do I address this? It's very important for any of you that go on to start your own companies, join companies, become senior leadership, or become a CEO yourself, that you recognize that not every employee within your organization may agree with you or may agree with the people they work next to day in and day out. And this was a very valuable lesson that many of us learned during this election cycle. Because a lot of folks in California vote a certain way, in Silicon Valley vote a certain way, within a specific company may vote a certain way. And so as I was expressing these thoughts, I wanted to make sure that our team understood that mine was one opinion, that other people within the organization may disagree, and that we should be respectful of those disagreements. We want to create an environment where people feel like they belong, as long as that's consistent with our culture and values. And again, that is an organization and an environment where all people, irrespective of their country of origin, their political leanings or affiliations, their creeds, their orientation, it is independent of all of those things, that we're going to treat one another with compassion, and we're going to take care of one another, we're going to be respectful of one another.
Thank you very much for that. We've been having a very rich debate over the past few days internally between both classes, and drawing the line between our personal reactions to what, as an institution, we need to represent has been a tricky, I would say at least, discussion. So thank you very much for this perspective. It's great. And before we go into the specifics of LinkedIn, I wanted to get your take on another topic that could potentially have very high impact on the workforce. So a couple of months ago, you addressed the LinkedIn employees, and you told them about what some people refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. So can you tell us a bit more about that concept and how you think it's actually going to shift the dynamics of the workforce and the economy as a whole?
Absolutely. So this was a theory that I first became familiar with through the World Economic Forum. And they were talking about the fourth industrial revolution, the first mechanization, largely based on the steam engine. And the second was mass production, and that was largely based on the introduction of electricity, division of labor, assembly lines in factories. The third was automation, and that followed electronics, early stage computing, and IT. And this fourth industrial revolution based on robotization. And the technologies and the innovations underpinning this fourth industrial revolution include robots, AI, sensors, autonomous driving, etc. And what's noteworthy about this fourth industrial revolution is that in the first three cases, new innovations, new technologies gave rise to companies that generated massive gains in productivity and new job opportunities. And there is increasingly a belief that in this latest fourth industrial revolution, that may not be the case. That the new technologies may actually displace more workers and jobs than they create. And certainly that was the case in this body of research from the World Economic Forum, where they predicted while 7 million gross jobs would be eliminated between now and 2020, 2 million would be added through the advent of new technology. So we would lose 5 million jobs. And there are some that believe that is a highly conservative estimate, that far more people than that will be displaced as a result of new technologies and innovation. And you can see this now and start to feel it. And sure enough, at this year's Davos event that's hosted by the World Economic Forum, there was a general consensus that one of the key points to come out of this, one of the key learnings was this whole meme, this whole idea has been discussed now for years. It's been predicted for years. And if you talked to attendees this year, they felt like something had tipped. And whether it was heads of state or CEOs, founders, there was a general consensus that it was no longer a prognostication, it was actually happening. And all of you have probably seen this anecdotally, week in and week out, if you're following business news. It seems like literally every other week, there's another story about a major factory that has decided to deploy robot technology that will displace tens of thousands of people, or a major retailer and major warehousing infrastructure that has grown the number of robots being deployed by tens of thousands, or autonomous driving, which has the potential to happen far faster than anyone could have anticipated. And for those that don't know, trucking is like the #1 profession in California. A lot of people don't realize that. And what happens to those folks? I think it's absolutely essential that anytime there are stories about these new technologies, it's wonderful to be excited about innovation and things that could potentially unlock tons of value on a global basis for people. But I think it's also equally important, if not more important, every time we see these articles, to understand what's happening to the people who are being impacted and potentially displaced. Mm-hmm. What programs are we putting into place to reskill these employees? Are they being certified in new skills for the jobs that are and will be, as opposed to the jobs that once were? Where is the spirit of entrepreneurship and the investment and the energy in vocational training and innovation in how we train people to take on these new technologies and the job opportunities created by these new technologies? How are we leveraging infrastructure that we couldn't have even dreamed of decades ago? Take LinkedIn as an example. You look at the data we have. We're developing the world's first economic graph, and our understanding, take any locality in the world, and we're in a position now where we can understand the fastest growing jobs within that locality, the skills required to obtain those jobs. We can understand the skills of the aggregate workforce within that locality. We can measure the gap, and then we can provide this data to junior colleges, vocational training facilities, even four-year universities, and help them to create just-in-time curriculum. This is the kind of thing I think increasingly as a society we need to be spending more time on understanding and solving for.
All right. So actually you've touched upon what I was about to ask you next, which is educational reform is something that you're very passionate about. Mm-hmm. So let me rephrase the question and to ask, are there any systems out there that you think will provide the better match to this shifting economy and the needs of the workforce moving forward?
Well, coming back to education reform, because it goes well beyond how we're going to reskill displaced workers, I think from a generational perspective, it starts with primary education, mm-hmm. and then K through 12. And we need to make sure that increasingly we are providing schools and teachers the assets, the curriculum, the technology they need to bring our students into the 21st century successfully. Rote learning, and the same things that were deployed to help people train for the industrial revolutions that came prior that we talked about. For those that don't know, well, we'll do a little bit of a pop quiz. How many in the audience know why there is summer vacation in American schools? So the kids could go harvest the fields. When was the last time any of you went out harvesting the fields? Okay. Do you know why, in part, we sit in rows and why rote learning was such an important part of primary school? Anyone? Yeah. Yeah. Assembly lines. So we exist in a different world, and increasingly the world has become more digital, more networked. Things change much faster than they've ever changed. That's not anecdotal, it's empirical. And so we need to teach critical reasoning. We need to teach creative problem solving. We need to teach collaboration. We need to teach compassion. We need to change the way in which we're training the future workforce. I think there are now technologies that we can take advantage of that will help teachers and help administrators focus more and more of their time on teaching these skills. And we can leverage adaptive learning platforms to teach more of the commodity-based skills, the basics. And we're still in very early innings in terms of being able to fully deploy and take advantage of these new technologies. We were talking a little bit about the importance of vocational training, so moving beyond the generational change. That's going to take years, but we got to start investing in that right now. But what about the workers being displaced today? We need to go all in on vocational training. And historically, and speaking in the US now, from a societal perspective, I think we've placed tremendous emphasis and weighting on degrees from prestigious four-year universities or graduate schools. And that matters, and it's important. But it's also important for people who are going down a different path. to have access to an education where they can develop a skill and a trade that they can utilize to earn a living and create a career path. And you see this in countries like Germany that have done this extraordinarily well. And so this isn't just a technical issue, it's also a societal and a cultural issue.
Thank you very much for that. Now we want to get to know you a little bit better. So we're going to take you a little bit back to the start of your time at LinkedIn.
I thought we were about to do This Is Your Life, and like, you're going to start flashing like pictures from my childhood.
That's what I would have done if immigration wasn't an issue.
Okay.
But essentially, back when you look at when you first joined LinkedIn,
Yep.
Transitions are very difficult, especially when it's a very fast-growing environment.
Yeah.
So what were the key success factors that kind of made the handover between Reid Hoffman and yourself smooth?
Reid Hoffman, Stanford alum, Reid Hoffman.
Yep. Teaches
Symbolic systems. Anyone? Symbolic systems study underground?
Had him in a class last year as a guest.
Did you?
Yeah.
Good man. Very, very bright, extraordinarily thoughtful. And that's actually a part of why our handoff was so successful. So I first met Reid, as the dean said, at a dinner. We were at a restaurant in San Francisco, and we were doing some brainstorming for an event aptly titled Brainstorm, and they wanted to talk to about 20 or 30 folks from the Valley about their ideas for event material and the agenda. And I remember Reid answering a question that had been posed, and I was really struck by not only his intelligence, but how he was coming at it from a different perspective. And we had been told by different people who knew us that we should meet at some point, so we had a chance to meet on that occasion. And a little piece of trivia, Reid was actually the last guest speaker I brought in to talk to my team when I was an executive at Yahoo, before I ended up leaving the company. At any rate, when LinkedIn elected to make a change at the CEO level, for those that don't know, Reid had been the founder and CEO. He had then hired a professional CEO, a guy named Dan Nye, who did a wonderful job. And Reid was the president of product, reporting to Dan, who was the CEO, who then reported to Reid as the chairman and founder of the company. What could possibly go wrong with that construct? So it didn't work out the way people had hoped, and the two of them had a great deal of admiration for one another. That's not what it was about. So when Reid was looking to make a change and he asked me to get involved, he said, at the time I was an executive in residence at Greylock, and LinkedIn was a portfolio company, and I understood they were making a change, and someone said, would I be interested in helping out? I said, absolutely, that's one of the reasons I'm here. So I'll take a couple of days a week, and I'll help Reid out any way I can. And they said, okay, you should go meet with him. I said, okay. So I go meet with Reid. We were actually in his house, and I think I was sitting in a LinkedIn beanbag chair with like the words innovation, and everything had an in logo on it. And he said, so I have two lists. I have an interim CEO list and a full-time CEO list, and you're the only person on both lists, so what do you say? It's like, whoa, what, I was going to volunteer to help. He's like, no, you gotta come in and let's make this happen. So I agreed that I was going to start on an interim basis because I had just left Yahoo. I was there for a number of years and wasn't sure how quickly I wanted to get back into a full-time position. And I said, as long as he was open to having me full-time and I could start interim, I'd be open to that. And he said, as long as you're open to being full-time, you start as interim and then we'll see how it goes. I said, great. The night before I joined, I called him. I was going to start as interim president with all the responsibilities of a CEO, but interim president. And I called him and I said, so you're still going to be the CEO, at least in title symbolically. I'm coming as interim president. Which decisions would you like to make? And which decisions do you think I should be responsible for? I want to make sure we had clarity before I started. He said, this is easy. It's your ball. You run with it. I go, what? He said, yeah, you're going to make all the decisions. That's why I'm bringing you in like this. And I just learned what not to do. Now, to give you an indication of truly how thoughtful he is, he went a step further. And over the course of the first 10 weeks I was at LinkedIn, Reid was out of the office. He scheduled trips and travel for roughly 6 to 8 weeks of that time. Because he recognized no matter what we explained to people, that muscle memory was still going to be in place and people were still going to go to him. So he literally physically took himself out of the situation so I could build that connective tissue with the organization. So between that and between the graciousness of my predecessor, Dan Nine, the way he handed off the baton. You know, in a situation like that, the person who's leaving the company can sometimes be angry and bitter, and they can poison the well to some extent. And Dan did the exact opposite. He operated with absolute integrity throughout the entire process. The last thing I would say is one of the most frequently asked questions I got when I first joined LinkedIn was, what's it like working with Reed? And that was code for, what's all the drama happening between you and the founder of the company? And what people didn't realize was I joined LinkedIn not in spite of Reed, but in large part because of Reed. I had a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for him. I wanted to work with him. And he's gone on to become one of my closest friends, someone I would certainly go to for advice, and we've had a wonderful partnership ever since.